Glad you could join me today for the first of our author series, and it's with someone who I not only have read his books, but consider him a good friend of me and actually our organization. Michael Bernick is not only extremely knowledgeable, he's extremely accessible, and he really provides a lot of support to families like ours throughout the year. He's a former director of the California State Labor Department, and he has over 40 years in the field of employment education. He's currently an employment attorney and with the international law firm of Duane Morris, and he is a fellow with the Milken Institute and an adjunct professor at Stanford. He's a graduate of Harvard and Oxford University and UC Berkeley. And Michael not only walks the walk, he talks the talk. He has a son on the spectrum. He devotes himself to a group called Ascend that's similar to OCASG's, but up in Northern California. And Michael and I have been talking about him coming to discuss his new book for, I think, a year now. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Michael Bernick.
Thank you, Judy. And I'm glad we went around because, Judy, I'm going to change. I have a PowerPoint, part of that, but I'm also going to change because I really want to focus on the resources we have available in our community and what it is to find a job today. I mentioned briefly, I have a son, William, who's 31. And have been involved in the autism community since the early 90s. Like some of you back then, if you mentioned autism, people might say, yeah, I've heard of Rain Man, or is this, because Rain Man had come out in 1988. Now, of course, I can't mention autism employment without someone saying I have a niece, nephew, grandson. So that's positive. The demographics are in that sense with us in terms of employment, and but we still have a way to go, and that's what I want to focus on today. So without further ado, let me turn to the share my screen, if that's okay. The book is the Autism Full Employment Act, The Next Stage of Jobs. And it builds on, I had done a book in 2015 called The Autism Job Club. But by last year, it struck me that things had changed so much, and in a positive way, that it was time to somewhat update it and look to the future. And that's what this book does, basically. It says, and it focuses on two levels. What can we as individuals do for ourselves if we're on the spectrum, or family members? What are the strategies that make sense today? And collectively, what can we do as a community in terms of trying to expand opportunities? It's very interesting, you know, in employment, the early 1990s were also a time when with the ADA, we were just beginning to build up this structure, and over the past 30 years, we have built up a structure here in California of, you know, employment resources for adults with autism and other developmental differences. But if you look at the most recent data on employment rates among, my son is a regional center client. I suspect many of your children are, or some of you on this webinar today are. Among adults, now this is pretty striking. Among adults 16 to 74 who are regional center clients, only 14% recorded any wages in 2020. And that was, of course, during the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, the rates were very low. They were all below 16%. So for regional center clients, despite the increase in funding and so forth, the employment rates are very modest, and you know, it's timely now to bring it up, because in the governor's budget that he released a couple weeks ago, there is significantly increased funding. So that's the point of the book in terms of both individually what we can do, and after Judy, after we went around today, I really want to focus in some ways more on the individually. What does it mean? And let me say, the starting point of the book, the starting point of everything I do, is there's a place in the labor market for everyone. My son did go through the public school system here in San Francisco in the inclusion program. He went through Cal State East Bay, which is one of our East Bay, Cal State systems up here in the north, and has a BA, but he also has very, very, very severe OCD issues and other behavioral issues. And so it's been now 9 years since he graduated from Cal State East Bay. And he's been employed most of the time, but probably we've gone through about 12 or 13 different jobs. So, you know, it's not an easy process, and I spend a lot of time on it. But, you know, I think I've learned something through going through the process with him, and I'm also a volunteer job coach for other people in our job group. And as Judy says, I'm part of a group that's very similar to your group. It's called Ascend. It's for adults on the spectrum and family members and advocates. We are one of, I think, the oldest groups in California, you know, extra governmental group like this. And we have a job club similar to yours, and we have a TV show, and we have various activities, but it's all an approach of mutual support. And I got involved with Ascend when William was graduating from Cal State East Bay. I was looking around to see what sort of adult groups there were. There's so much going on in the K through 12 space, but for adults there didn't seem to be much. But I just sort of wandered into Ascend. You know, I knew nothing about it, but I've been very involved since then, and it's really become my main community up here. Everything I write about is based on Ascend and the job searches of our members, my son and others, and try to draw some lessons. So that's Ascend. This is a picture of our, just a small part of Ascend at one of the Christmas parties at our house in December. It's a fun picture. You can see it's similar to your group. It's a wide mix of racial and ethnic groups, and it's really developed sort of our own community. So let's turn to consider. Let me go quickly through some of these points, because as I say, I want, based on what I just heard, I want to switch it, Judy, to focus more on what does it mean in a job search today. But let me say we have a very extensive system here in California. We have 2 state departments, in Department of Rehab and Department of Developmental Services, to provide employment services free of charge. The first thing I'd say to everyone is, if you should be enrolled, if you can be in both, you should definitely be enrolled in DOR. That's a no-brainer. You can't rely, frankly, on these services in terms of doing nothing on your own, but you gotta, and if you haven't enrolled, Monday morning, you know, enroll either yourself or your child, you know, family member at DOR. The same thing I would say with DDS. Obviously, with both of these, they provide services to our community at no charge. DDS, the regional center system, is more difficult to get into, or in the sense that you need to show more severe developmental differences. But I would strongly, if you're not enrolled, because both of these provide services free of cost and throughout the lifetime of the client. So my son's enrolled in both DOR and DDS. There's also, we built up an extensive network of local providers. These are some in my area, the ARC, Best Buddies, Goodwill, and as well as East Bay Innovations, Pomeroy. And these are worth reaching out to. I guess the first general point, Judy, I'd make is none of us can do it alone. None of us. You've got to reach out to other resources in our community. If you say, oh, I'm going to try to get my son or daughter a job through the normal processes that is going through job boards, say, or LinkedIn or so forth, you might be able to. I wouldn't be able to. But it's much more difficult, and it's unnecessary because we have these resources, DOR, DDS, local providers who are there to provide services and free of cost. And then there's this paid internship program for regional center clients that, as Judy knows, I'm a big fan of. It subsidizes wages for people in our community. We're a regional center client at 100%. The employer doesn't even have to take on the person on their payroll. There's a third party. It can be done through a third party. It's an excellent program. As you might expect, they can't spend all the money. They allocate about 20 million a year past couple of years because they can't get employers involved, and most parents don't know about it. So I want to come back to that. That's a good resource. But the main point, number one, is don't try to do it alone. There are resources out there, and I should add, Judy, if anyone has any questions, you can first, anyone can just Google me, and my email here at Twain Morris is on the web. It's on the internet. But Judy also.
Yeah, and Michael, I've asked people to, I just want to say a couple things. One, these slides were sent to you and they'll be sent to you again. So don't worry about taking notes. Second of all, we're going to have plenty of time for conversation. So if you have a question, put it in the chat. Robin and I will be keeping an eye on it. And if there's a good time to interrupt Michael, we might do that. But we will have time for discussion at the end. And but I'm loving it, Michael, and thank you for all you've said.
Yeah, well, feel free to anyone should feel free to email me. Frankly, the book does go into more detail on all of these, but I'm glad to also answer specific questions. So we have this system. Principle number one: don't try to do it alone. As I say it, this is, despite all of this infrastructure, from a collective point of view, from a social point of view, things haven't significantly changed since 1990. These are some of the statistics on employment. I'm on the board of our regional center, GGRC, and we have one of the highest employment rates, and that's at a dismal 21%. So the point is that even with this, now there is greater and greater emphasis, of course, in the regional center on autism for the obvious point of demographics. Adults and children with autism constitute less than 5% of the population receiving services in our regional center system, not just in my regional center, GGRC, but statewide, less than 5%. Today, 1 in 3 regional centers clients is an individual with autism. So the system also is becoming more attuned to our community. Now, what I've seen over the past 10 years is a real growth in various types of internet job boards aimed at our community, and other use of AI for our community, and other internet, I would say internet-based instruments. Now, I have nothing against these, and I would encourage you to use them as appropriate. But in my experience with my son and the people that are sent, what our people have needed is very low-tech, one-to-one assistance in identifying and pursuing jobs and in retention. So I could tell my son, oh, why don't you go on LinkedIn and look for jobs? Or why don't you go on Indeed and look for jobs? It wouldn't get very far. But he's gotten a job where we've had either his DOR counselor or me have been able to identify job openings. And so it's this one-to-one that I think, we really need to emphasize on an individual basis and a collective basis. That's why I like DOR, or the providers, or DDS. Again, as a regional center client, you or your family member are entitled. Remember, DDS is an entitlement program, entitled to these types of employment services free of cost. So I think this one-to-one is really needed and should be, and if you're in that situation, it's worth pushing for. Unfortunately, from a collective point of view, the system's very uneven, high caseload numbers, limited training, so that the job placement people aren't, we need to professionalize the field, and especially job developer. But it is what it is now. We got it. Collectively, we need to improve it. But individually, I would strongly encourage everyone to take advantage and really of these free services in our community, and particularly the free services that have to do with the one-to-one identifying jobs. I mean, that's what people at Best Buddies or ARC should be doing. They should be working with my son or any of your family members and identifying jobs, selling our people to employers, showing them the incentives, financial incentives, emphasizing the positive. Now, Judy, this is an important point, I think. Often employers, in workplace situations, I've found employers and coworkers can focus on the negative, strange behaviors and so forth. But my son, our community, bring a lot of positive things to the environment. My son is preternaturally upbeat. He's positive. He's upbeat all the time. And that's, I think, helpful in a workplace. And he's willing to do anything. And the few studies that have been done on this, the study of Walgreens and so forth, suggest, that's fairly common across our community in terms of positive nature, loyalty to the job. So I think it's important to emphasize these elements to the positive in going through this job search and process with a job coach or job counselor and this one-to-one. So that's the first thing, and that's what we need to do individually, and collectively we need to build up a better system. So I'm a big fan of these neurodiversity workforce intermediaries. People say, well, we got to reach out to employers in California and sell employers. And it has changed in the past 10 years. Obviously, the most high profile are the Autism at Work programs. And these are good programs. SAP, Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, EY. There are about 20 or 30 of these Autism at Work programs, and they're very good. And I would encourage people to look at them, but they are very, very, very small in numbers. nationwide. There are about 800 participants nationwide in all the companies. So VMware here where I am, I'm here in the financial district, by the way, in San Francisco, over at One Market Plaza. Some of you may know it, but Salesforce is, I'm looking at the Salesforce tower now, and Salesforce has an Autism at Work program, and VMware has one. But there's still, I think the Salesforce one has still fewer than 10 people in VMware. And a lot of these Autism at Works programs are focused on tech positions. Now, I remember back in 2013, 2014, there was a whole focus on, Special Eastern and others, that people in our community had particular tech skills. And there, this was going to be a big field, quality control people and others. It never turned out to be the case for many reasons. For a while, I thought my son, but he has no tech skills. But it turned out more generally for the community that would be the case. So yes, these Autism at Work programs are valuable if you can get into them. They're very good. They really set the gold standard, but they're small in number.
Michael, I'd like to add a little bit to this in context of Orange County.
Yes.
So you'll recognize NeuroTalent Works. You might recognize Evo Libre. We got them to come down and be a vendor to us. There's also Grit and Flow. There's a number of organizations down here who are working to try and expand the number of companies in Orange. A lot of the companies are up in Northern California that are part of this Autism at Work movement. And so we've been trying to encourage companies down here to be hiring as well. And that's the kind of work that Jessica Lee at NeuroTalent Works does. One thing I'd like to suggest, and usually every April we focus in on this, but many of you all work, and many of these programs are driven by the parents that work in the companies. So every month I send you a newsletter of activities, and there's a place to click on and provide the name of a company that you work for, the name of some contacts, or indicating that you would be willing to help create a pathway into your organization. And that we followed up on about 3 of those from last year or the year before, and those actually are leading to employment. So really, it's really paying it forward by you deciding that you're going to help with your organization. It may not put your child at work there, but somebody may help at some other organization in finding a job that will end up impacting your child. So it takes a county, and I'd like to encourage you to do it, but this is a really important piece of the puzzle for us to have higher levels of employment here in Orange County. Thanks, Michael.
That is a very good point. And we may, if we have time, we should come back to it. It's not some of these companies, Judy. All these, virtually all of them, have been started, pushed by parents within the company. Microsoft, Autism Work program, a couple parents within Microsoft pushed it. SAP, parents. EY, parents. JP Morgan Chase, parents. So it's not virtually all of them. I can think of a few examples where, like Salesforce, where it wasn't pushed only by parents, but yes, that's how most of these initiatives get started. Parents within, that's why demographics are with us, because there's more people have family members that should expand. The other reason that demographics are with us is the heightened profile of these disability offices, disability equity and inclusion offices within large companies are, just for the obvious, in the past year or two have gained a much higher profile. So back to this, yeah, these neurodiversity workforce intermediaries are very, I think they're one of the most encouraging developments in terms of expanding, especially in the private sector, And people say, well, we don't really know what works, but we do know what works in terms of what makes an effective program. That's what these guys, Evo Libra, NeuroTalent Works, others are moving forward on. They have a structured hiring program, and even more importantly, a structured retention program. They're just like Jessica, you mentioned Jessica, Judy. Jessica's a good example, or Jeff Miller at Potentia, or Rebecca Beam at Zavicon. These are people largely from private sector backgrounds. These are small entrepreneurial ventures, and what they're doing is reaching out to employers. They're starting with jobs that employers are having difficulty filling, and they're saying basically, let us partner with you to put together structured and ongoing hiring and retention efforts. And this is one area, expanding the role of these intermediaries. Before we started, Judy and I were talking about this new state money coming down that can be used to expand the role of the intermediaries, in other words, employer outreach. But I think just as a group, Judy, it's worth your group continuing to work with NeuroTalent and others, because there is funding now, or will be soon, to do it. But this is a positive if we look at collectively sort of what can be done in our state to expand employment. The growth of this subsector is valuable. And again, as individuals, I would reach out to, I'm sure you probably have, I know NeuroTalent Works is putting together a registry of job seekers, aren't they, Judy?
Yeah, and they're all expanding their services, so to speak.
Right.
So Zavicon, I know that a number of people, in fact, Diane is here with her son Josh, who started working more closely with Zavicon, and they've helped find placement. They're the one who I'm collaborating with on Career Club. So they've all been expanding on trying to create ways for people to connect to jobs. They've also expanded in offering some trainings for individuals looking for jobs, as well as their focus on companies and helping them implement hiring programs that are not only more individual friendly in the hiring process, but after the fact. So luckily we have a number of them down here that are very helpful. Yes, sorry, Michael.
Yeah, I'd say down in your area, Zavicon and NeuroTalent Works in particular are active. I'm glad that Jan and Eva Libri is connected to you guys. She does a good job. But this is another group, as well as if we're putting together a list, DOR and DDS definitely need to register. And then the providers like the ARC or Best Buddies, or I'm not sure the others down in Orange County, but that provide direct intensive services. And it's worth enrolling in these, well, NeuroTalent Works and the other workforce intermediaries active in Orange County, as a way of yet another way to look for jobs. But again, these are all resources. The theme being these are all resources targeted at our community, that go beyond sort of the general Indeed, LinkedIn type of job search. Now, this has driven me nuts. State and local government, and again, this is sort of a collective thing, and maybe something for your group down in Orange County, Judy. State and local governments should be main employers of people in our community. They go around and tell private employers, oh, you ought to hire people with disabilities. And all of them, the state and local governments, have on paper program. But if you go beyond their paper explanation and look at results, again, they're very limited. California has a LEAP program, and the data is elusive. I will tell you, our ascend experiences with LEAP have been uniformly negative. Nobody's gotten a job. I think my son's applied for like 30 jobs. But this is an area that, well, I would say two things on the state level. It may be changing a little bit now just because the state, getting into the state, which traditionally has been so hard in entry-level jobs like office tech and office assistant, or even staff services, is getting a little bit easier. So I would encourage everyone to sign up for LEAP, get on the LEAP list, and pursue state jobs. But as a community, collectively, again, I think state government needs to be pushed to do much more, and the same with local governments. I mean, if you go to any of the local governments, if you go to my local government, San Francisco, they would say, oh yes, we have a disability program called ACE, Access to City Employment. But what it turns out to be is an illusion. Nobody ever gets jobs through there. A number of the jobs they have are, they list under ACE are, you know, experienced nurses and other jobs that require high skills. So as a community, this is something we need to do to push state government and local governments. At the same time, I would encourage individually all of us to, you know, get on the LEAP list, apply for state jobs, focus on, contact local governments. Obviously, local government jobs, state jobs are good. One of the reasons I've sort of looked at it for my son, because they're structured and they're usually much more stable. I mean, there's a lot of writing about the emerging gig economy in our state, the contingent economy. To succeed in those, you really need a significant level of executive skills. Well, that's not what that's not what my son does. So that's what I've looked to try to get into more stable employment, either state or local government or something like PG&E. So I would encourage everyone to look, get on the LEAP list. It's easy to do, and certainly some of the providers can help on that.
What's going on?
To pursue that, and then also as a community, we need to push both state and government, local governments to really go beyond the paper programs they have and actually show some results. Now, the next area is another one that drives me nuts. This is our universities, foundations, and major nonprofits in our state. A number of our universities up here, UCSF, Stanford, others get a lot of money for autism research, and yet their hiring is very limited. And this is so, even though universities, foundations, large nonprofits don't have the same market pressures that other firms do, and even though they often trumpet their social goals. So I think this is, you know, this sector of nonprofits and higher education needs to be a focus for our community. I would encourage people on to look at opportunities here. There should be some, but you know, unlike local and state governments, most of the universities and foundations and nonprofits don't even yet have targeted goals. I'm glad, Judy, you mentioned you have someone placed at Stanford. They've at least done a little bit, I think, but not a lot. Now, job clubs and mutual support. Our job club is in its 10th year. As I mentioned before, our motto, if we had one, would be don't do it alone. Connect with the infrastructure of public and nonprofit placement agencies. And so, you know, we've gone through like 5 of these elements of the infrastructure. and DOR, DDS, the providers, the neurodiversity intermediaries, state and local government, but also it's important to connect with I'm very glad that everyone's here, Judy. That's exactly what they need to do, a group like this. And that's what we are as Ascent. We're the same way. We get together once a month, and we try to use our contacts in a matter of mutual support. For family members, the other thing we stress is use all networks and contacts. There's a line of books and articles that criticize the so-called helicopter parent. There's so much wrong with that literature, but one thing wrong for our community is that it's inapplicable. We want to do everything possible to use our networks and contacts to try to find jobs. That includes reaching out to getting involved with groups like this. People ask me, first thing I say is, you should look at joining us at Ascent. Don't be out there alone. You want to plug into this network, both governmental network and the extra governmental network. So that, as well as the government resources that I've covered before, we want to, I think, also look at our own networks. Question raised here as we were going around the group, Judy, concerned perhaps people in our community more severely impacted. My view is that there's a place in the labor market for everyone, and that's what I truly believe that. It's a big issue now here in California because, of course, we've been ending the alternative workshops and the 14C work program, and now the whole mantra is competitive integrated employment. Frankly, I don't think that's realistic for at least a segment of our community, but I think the good news is that there's recognition of this, and there's a big push to look at new alternatives for the most severely impacted. And I think we all want to get involved in this effort. And anyone who emails me, I can connect them to how I think people might get involved and how I'm involved. But I really want to come back. People say, oh, my son or daughter can't really work, but that's not true. There really is a place for everyone, and the place may be part-time, and it may be in what we used to call a sheltered workshop. But I think my belief is that we all need, some place to go to every day. My son definitely needs some place to get out of the house and go every day. And I think that's what we all need. And it's been unfortunate during the pandemic that so many of our day programs and other resources for our community have been closed. So I've probably gone on too long, Judy, and we should get to questions, but I will just say, I would encourage, as I say, everyone there is a place for everyone. As people as members of our community, we need to work together. And that could be as a volunteer job coach or mentor. It could be advocacy within your workplace. And it certainly could be joining in collective activities that you're doing, Judy, in terms of more generally. So yeah, that's a quick summary.
Well, thank you, Michael. Why don't you stop sharing? We'll go into gallery mode. There are a number of questions in the chat that I'll ask you just to kind of get started while we transition. Let's see, but there were a number of questions. I'm going to just do one that I remember reading about, and that was a question on some of the state government programs like LEAP, and people were wondering how you sign up. I don't know if some of that we may just email them afterwards. But I'm
Well,
working back
there are
here.
a couple programs. I believe you sign up. I would say the best way to do it is if you're a DOR or DDS client, go through that. They should be able to, your counselor should be able to tell you, or any of these groups, or I could possibly just steer people. I mean, you basically go on the state website. But I think the best is if you're connected in any way to DOR or DDS, to go to DOR or DDS and say, I want to sign up for LEAP.
Okay.
Please help me walk through the process of signing up for LEAP.
Okay. This next question, Michael, is probably good for you because of your legal work. And it says, I heard about Goodwill paying workers with disabilities being paid less than minimum wage. Is that true?
Well, it could be. That's the 14C issue. And it is true that they have pay, and that of course has gotten a big blowback, and now the state is on a course to eliminate. So my own view is that people should be paid minimum wage, but most of these operations, the reason they don't pay minimum wage is that it doesn't work out financially, so you need some state subsidies. So yes, not only Goodwill, but anyone who's been paid. We have had a program, it's called 14C, that allows companies to employ workers with developmental differences at less than minimum wage. And that's going away.
Okay.
My hope is it'll be replaced by something.
There are some questions about applying for regional center. We have regional center coming later this year. So I think we'll focus, it's a process applying, and it's worthwhile to do if you can benefit from it, but a lot of people get rejected at first, so it's not an easy thing, especially this group is about high functioning autism, and so a lot of times you may not qualify. So it's important, but it's an important resource, especially it helps a lot before your kid's in school, and it helps tremendously in terms of having some resources when they become an adult. So it's worthwhile, but I think we'll do that when we bring in the people from Regional Center to discuss it.
Lifelong. It's lifelong.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is more extensive, but I'll read it to you. It's from Nancy. Can you talk about working from home, with what resources are out there to support that? As you know, it's hard to get my daughter out of bed for some days to go to work at Marshall's, for example, but she likes to watch YouTube, etc. There's so many opportunities now for having online businesses from home. Anyway, heard about micro-organization. Do you have any comments on the working at home?
Well, I mean, everyone's different in our community. Most of our Ascent people want to get out. So they want someplace to go every day, but maybe that your daughter doesn't. And the good news on that is there are more and more jobs that are focused on as remote work. So yeah, again, it's a matter, I think, of working with DOR, DDS, the providers, NeuroTalent Works, the others to identify what jobs might be available that are remote.
And I think you need to consider what your child's skill set is, because
Yeah.
a lot of the remote jobs are really about focusing on a certain skill set. So I think that's important. There were some questions about some of these Autism at Work programs and how to get on the list. And there's lots of different ways. I know that Lawrence Fung at Stanford has ways for you to register. A number of the different hiring programs have ways to register. You want to add to that, Michael?
No, the Stanford University project, and you can probably send the link, Judy, is one way of doing it. I'd encourage everyone to sign up. That's yet another registry. you can't depend on any one of these. So I would encourage people to sign up for that. Otherwise, it's a matter of checking like the Microsoft Autism at Work website. There's a special Autism at Work website that Microsoft has. The Microsoft program is great. It's just largely technical job.
Yeah, you need to be focused on working on this. And I do
Yes.
posts all the time on Facebook. So if you're not on our Facebook account or our LinkedIn account, you should be, if this is an important area for you. And I do post all the time when there's new activity or signups and things like that. Many of the Autism at Work programs have their own, you apply with them directly. But the Autism at Work Roundtable is working with organizations to try and centralize more the ability for folks to apply. But I don't think that's a done deal. And I think it's still, I think one of the problems, Michael, I'm curious, I think we've talked about this before. One of the problems is that it's very, a bunch of different cottage industries, a bunch of different organizations that are collecting names, and you work with that organization and you only have visibility into who that organization is working with. And so the trouble is that means you've got to kind of join a lot of different clubs in order to see everything. And it almost seems impossible. There really needs to be better visibility for someone about all the opportunities that are available. And I know that different organizations are working on it, but that's not something I've seen done. But you, Michael, you're more connected. You might have seen more.
No, you're right. I two things you said are important. Or among what one is, you got to work at this. There's no shortcut. I probably spend an hour a day on this stuff between job search and retention, and other issues, housing, health issues. You got to work on it, and there's no one registry. In other words, there's no one place you sign up for. There are multiple ones, and I've set out some of them. Judy mentioned the Stanford Neurodiversity Project. That's worth signing up for, as well as Zabacon, as well as NeuroTalent Works. They each are developing a registry, and each has their own job listings. I just think it's a much better use of resources than trying to go to Indeed or LinkedIn or the general ones.
Okay, there's a couple questions that I think are worth addressing. One is about losing Social Security benefits. And this is a big problem that I'm seeing. This is actually one of my initiatives to work on, is to address this, because if you're on SSI, you lose $1 of benefit after the first $80, $1 of benefit for every $2 you make, which is basically like cutting into your pay. And there's nothing about at least getting to poverty level before they do it. SSDI has more of a runway, but it's complicated. And in the Trump administration, there was effort to use this as an opportunity to basically reevaluate you and say you're not disabled anymore, and then take you off of the benefit completely. So there's a lot of things broken in encouraging people to work and the Social Security benefit. Michael, do you have anything else to add? I know I'm working on this. I don't know if you're working on it too, Michael, but it's one of the things that needs to get fixed.
A long standing issue in our community, and it is broken. I mean, it is just, and there's, people have been trying to address this. I remember about 20 years ago, they came up with this great idea of Ticket to Work, and you were going to be able to keep your health benefits for a time, and you're able to keep, and you just gradually remove it. Never works perfectly, for the obvious reason that if as you start to cut back on pay, there's a disincentive. I think the bigger disincentive, and what I find, is people don't want to get off SSI because they think correctly that it's going to be hard to get back on if you want to. So it's not a good system. I have no advice on how to navigate it.
Yeah, I think the thing you should do as a minimal step is if you are a DOR client, they have they can work with you. They have people assigned to like Project Independence to help you come up with a strategy.
Right. You're exactly right. That's the answer to all this. There is a network of benefit counseling groups. I'm on the board of one of them here in the Bay Area called Positive Resource Center. So there are people to help with this. So on an individual and a social point of view, it's probably helpless. But from an individual point of view, it's important to reach out to these benefit counseling groups, which are free.
Yeah, you can, there's ways of protecting your medical benefits. There's ways of using your ABLE account to move your payroll in too, so you could save a bit. So there are some strategies, but bottom line, it's the patient needs surgery.
Two questions that flashed by me, Judy, that I want to answer very quickly.
Sure.
One question was, how long can you stay on DOR? Formally, you stay on DOR until you are in a steady, job and so forth, and supposedly don't need assistance. But that's not. The good news is that's not true. You can stay as a DOR client as long as you can tell them, that you continue to need assistance, either in placement or retention. Then a question was raised about the subsidy program, and I really want to emphasize this. This is a super subsidy program. It's called the Paid Internship Program. It is limited to regional center clients, but for any adult who's a regional center client, they are eligible for this what's called the Paid Internship Program. You can get 100% of wages covered for up to 1,040 hours a year, and this can be a job generated by DOR or DDS, but often it's generated by parents. In other words, just as a bridge for William, between jobs, I've had him on paid internship program, on jobs, frankly, I've connected to. And these aren't big jobs, they're office assistant jobs. But as a family member, if you can identify a job opening, let's say someone who has a landscape company, or someone who has an insurance company, or someone who has a small restaurant, all they need to do is say, yes, we have a position here, and they have to verify the hours, but they don't have to pay anything. Again, this can be done through a third party. It is a super program. It's highly, highly underutilized. They can't spend the money for a combination of employers haven't rushed to it and parents don't know anything about it. But it's a super, super program to provide.
Yeah, and a little story, COVID killed it, but my son Josh was a film major at Cal State Fullerton, and we just happened to find a production company in Orange County called Silver Dream Factories, and ended up having a conversation with him. We did, and told him that Josh was eligible for a government program that would basically pay for his salary, and he wouldn't have to be on his payroll. And that was really important, not getting on payroll, because of a lot of the new legislation that was passed related to gig type jobs. And we were able to get him hired. It was just a single sheet he needed to sign. It was very streamlined. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was pretty easy relative to other government programs. And
well, it took part, but yes, it was.
It took us a month to pull it all together. But the point is that he could have been working there if there wasn't COVID for a long period of time. And this guy was really excited about having him work there, because he had other Cal State Fullerton students as interns and was looking forward to having another intern. So you can kind of help like Michael described, you can kind of help generate these opportunities. And even if your son or daughter is not a DOR client, not a regional center client, there are programs at DOR, there are programs at Workforce Development they do require them to actually be employed by the organization, but they will subsidize their salary to some degree. And we've had a couple of people in our career club starting to work for an organization through that program. A little bit more complicated, but definitely there are ways for organizations to have a sample of your son or daughter's talents without having to pay for all their salary.
I see there's a question here. How does one enroll in DOR and DDS? You just go through and Judy can help walk you through, or anyone. You have a local office down there.
Yeah, there's pages on our website with information, and they will be visiting us later this year. But you just call their offices to open a case. Someone had a question about the U.S. Post Office, and I know a person in our career club was really interested and was kind of overwhelmed by the process. Have you at Ascend dealt with anybody trying to deal with the post office and getting employed?
I've looked into it. The post office is good. We like the post office because it's steady employment and with all the benefits. And they do have a program. The challenge with the post office is sometimes where these big distribution centers, where they need mail sorters, where they're located. Since my son and most of our other Ascend members don't drive, but that's definitely worth looking at.
Okay.
But I want to go back to what you said about Josh. That is exactly what you need to do. So, and that was filmmaking, but it applies to any sector and any occupation. If you know someone who runs a restaurant or anything else, office work is, you just need some employer who says, I can use this person, and obviously you want to create a real job, but it's got real flexibility.
Yeah, and they just recently raised it from $10,400 a year to 1,040 hours, which is a good amount of hours. It's renewable after a year. So, but I had kind of come up with a whole structure that he could go from one program to the next. Didn't happen because of COVID, but
Ken, I mean, it's 1,040 hours a year, but then you can renew it the next year.
Exactly.
Or you are limited, and you're not set at minimum wage. They can pay anything.
Okay. So someone was asking about if they do approach their HR. I'm working with Grit and Flow, Zavicon, and NeuroTalentWorks. So if you nominate someone in your organization who wants to start an Autism at Work, they would be working with them, and they have presentations and information. It's better for them to work with one of those organizations than with Regional Center because they're not really set up for that outreach. But we have 3 great partners that we work closely with that handhold. I know one worked with Western Digital, who was nominated. We have somebody working with Capital Group. And they're working to help them launch their programs. Unfortunately, people seem slow to step on the gas, but they're all kind of working on it. So they would be working directly with one of these intermediaries that Michael spoke so highly of.
I think they're definitely worth contacting.
Okay. Okay, Facebook, I'll put that in the, actually, Robin, can you put the Facebook group information? It's in the president's letter. You can put
I
it.
see there's a question concerning part-time job while in college. Paid internship program applies to that. Doesn't have to be full-time.
Okay. And just so you know, there are programs for teenagers as well through DOR. You can start qualifying for DOR, I think, as early as 14.
And Judy, all the community colleges have what they call a disabled students program. So that's another office. Anyone who's connected with community colleges or Cal State Fullerton. I know at Cal State East Bay, when when William was there, they were just, they had a disabled students center, but they were just starting an autism program, and they've since have grown it. So these institutions, whether it's community college or CSU, they all have targeted programs.
Okay, I'm going to move into gallery mode, and we'll just see if, I think we've gone through if you guys want to turn your cameras on or raise your hand and let us know if you have a question. Thank you again, Michael, for just all you do, but for coming here today. I know you and I had talked about this for a year, so I hope it was worth the wait. And I want to thank everybody here for attending, and I hope you learned something. If you're not a member of our group, I think Robin will be adding you to our distribution list, so you could join, but we have lots of activities coming up. So hope to see you at a future meeting. But anything else, Michael?
Yeah, people can email me directly.
Oh, do you want to? Well, your email is on your presentation, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it.
Okay, and this session is being recorded. In the next day or two, I'll make that recording available. We'll have a link to Michael's book and a link to the presentation. So when you get that email from me, even though I know you get lots of email from me, don't delete it.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.